Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. Two people went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. "Oh God, I thank you that I'm not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I pay tithes on my whole income." But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "Oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, the latter went home justified, not the former. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Hello and welcome to Closer Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bayer, your host, and we're glad that you can join us. Oh God, thank God I'm not like the rest of these other people. I think I'd change that. Oh God, thank God other people are not like me. They're probably a lot holier than I am, and I hope they are. Wow. What does it take to be arrogant in the sight of God? How do you do that? How do you look at yourself and think you're all that and God ought to be really impressed with me? You know, I sit here every week. I give a talk. Been a priest 46 years. Gave a sermon every day. A lot of people probably, "Oh, I like your talks, thank you. That's why you watch. Oh, Father, I really enjoyed your sermon, thank you." You know, that's not why you come to church. You come for the Eucharist, not for me. I just happen to be a little addition to the Eucharist. But I know myself. I know what you see on television is not what I see in the mirror every morning. I know where the warts are. I know what the past sins are. I know how human I can be. I know how judgmental I can be. I know how impatient I can be. I know how imprudent I can be. I know all those things. And so it's really, really important, you know, not to think that if I get to heaven, the price of real estate is going up because they never had anyone this good before up there, okay? And that whole arrogance. Look at me, I am so holy. And people can do that very arrogantly, or people can do that supposedly very humbly. And, you know, they come and they're always in church and, you know, they've got their head bowed and they've got their prayer books and they've got, you know, this big cross on their chest and they, you know, but anyone who's different, boy, they're ready to launch. Anyone who does, you know, something out of line, they're ready to accuse them and call them sinners and get a grip, will you? You know, years ago, and I use this all the time, We are who we are in the sight of God. Nothing more, nothing less. And I think we need to remember that pretty much in everything that we do. You know, years ago they had that little bracelet, what would Jesus do? That little WWJD. Everybody walked around with that. And, you know, it became more of a piece of rubber jewelry than it became a mindset. But the idea that we look at ourselves as doing God a favor because we're so wonderful. And I've heard, you know, various groups of people who do mission work. And I think mission work is absolutely wonderful. But we don't go on a mission so that we can take care of all those poor, unfortunate people. We go on a mission to learn. The very first time I went to Calcutta, some of the people that I went with they were somewhat prominent. They were coaches and restaurateurs and, you know, business partners of the rich and famous and agents of the, you know, of the rich and famous. And, you know, they went there with a pocket full of money. And they left within 24 hours because they thought they were rich so that they could fix the poverty. What they didn't count on was learning from those who had nothing. What they didn't count on was seeing the face of God, not who needed something to eat, but needed for you to realize something that you hadn't realized yet. One of my great friends was a man who, at night in the rectory where I slept, they had a gate, you couldn't get to the door, and they had a little guard shack, and he slept in the guard shack with a couple dogs in case someone tried to break in the rectory. Because having a roof over your head and running water was more than 19 million people in that city had. And so it was a great challenge. But what happened is Anthony and I became very good friends. And we'd go around the city together, and he accompanied me, and he really educated me about the streets of Calcutta, something, you know, a big white American with money in his pocket didn't always realize, okay? And then finally, he was so proud. He wanted me to see his home. And he takes me through these back alleys, and we got to a concrete room, no door on it, but a concrete room that had a mattress on the floor, like a maybe full-size bed mattress. It had a light in there, and it had a fan, one of these ceiling fans. And in the corner, there were 3 or 4 cow pies. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, cow dung that had dried and hardened, and a couple little aluminum pans. And that was his kitchen. You light them, and then you put the pan on top of it, and it cooks whatever you have in the pan. You know, dried cow dung was an energy source. And Anthony could not quit telling me how good God was to him, because when it rained, his children didn't get wet. And in that one room that was probably 10 by 10 lived Anthony, his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 2 children. And he was just so very, very happy that he couldn't believe God had been this good to him. And then I come home and I go back to the parish and I meet with the Catholic daughters, and a big argument erupts in the middle of the meeting about whether or not we're having ham and turkey at the Thanksgiving social. And you go, wow, you know. And the thing that people without have to teach us is what it means to truly depend upon God. They don't have a car. They don't have a travel allowance. They don't go to restaurants. They don't eat out. They don't have a full refrigerator and a stocked freezer. They don't have any of that. And in the midst of their nothingness, they're able to understand the generosity of God, because I found some bread or I found some food in a dumpster and it had hardly been eaten. And my whole family was able to have something that night. And they consider God looking out for them. Not angry at God because they have to route through a dumpster, or they've got a few rupees in their pocket and they can go buy fresh fruit or vegetables with their family, and the whole family, each one of us had an apple or whatever it was, and they feel very blessed by God. And so the hypocrisy that comes with an abundance, and I can tell you, having been there 7 summers in a row, we have no idea what poverty is in this country. We have a great poverty of spirit. As Mother Teresa once says, there's no greater poverty that a child should have to die in order for you to live the way you wish. But we don't know material poverty in this country. We don't walk down the streets of a major city and have children with bloated stomachs out of starvation. There's always a place where they can go. There's always some food that can be given to them. Yeah, maybe they don't have the best food and maybe they don't eat off china plates, but we don't know what that is. And so when the Pharisee goes towards God and brags about everything that he does for God, he really sells himself short. He doesn't understand what God has done for him. In his riches and in his wealth, he thinks his success has been dependent upon him. He has never come to understand that our existence depends upon God. And so rather than focus on his need for God, he sees himself as being generous to God, and God ought to be very pleased with him, rather than recognizing his tremendous need for God. And that's the Pharisaical look at life that too many of us come to believe we're part of. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Baye from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Thank you for being here today, and a special thanks for the support that you give us. First of all, your prayerful support we so desperately need, and also your financial support. We are donor-driven, and that is what keeps us on the air today. As you well know, the truth is in great demand and in very short supply, and mainstream media is not going to bring you the truth of the Gospels of our Lord Jesus Christ, because that's not socially acceptable and it's not politically correct. Certainly we all realize that when this life journey's over, we don't stand before the Supreme Court, we stand before the throne of God. Therefore, with great clarity and great charity, to pronounce the truth of the gospel is important. Your prayers, your financial support enables us to do that. So we thank you, and may God bring you closer in your walk with the Lord each day. God bless you. Oh God, I thank you that I'm not like the rest of humanity. Greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes on my whole income. But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." Hello and welcome back to Closer Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bayer, your host, and we're glad that you can join us. "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I fast twice a week. I pay tithes. And so I got it made. You wouldn't believe the amount of money I've donated to the church. You wouldn't believe, the amount I donate to charity. That's good. That's really good. And I'm not in any way disparaging or mocking the charitable dollar. Many, many people, as well as many, many churches, depend on the charity of the faithful. And for that, we're very, very grateful. Here's the problem. And it's only a problem if you're like the Pharisee. Just because you give money doesn't mean that you have a different set of rules to live by. One of the challenges, and I've seen it happen so often, it happened to some good friends of mine in Northern California just recently. They get married, they struggle, they raise a family, they're going to church, they're trying to do the right thing, and the kids get grown and they're educated, and that saves you so much money a month, and then you're still young enough and your business takes off, and and now you're in your mid-50s and you've got resources at your disposal like you've never had. And all of a sudden, you get very distorted. You think, I got a pocket full of money, and now I can do all this stuff. And you're still doing charitable things, but you're starting to tell yourself, I need to enjoy life. I've worked hard all my life. So that means partying. And sometimes that partying means overindulgence, and that means travel. And sometimes that travel means I go to places and do things that I've got no business doing. And then sometimes it thinks, I'm halfway through my life. I want something new. I want something exciting. And then all of a sudden someone else comes along, and that's a little bit fancier. That's a little bit nicer. That's a little bit more than what I've been used to. And all of a sudden, everything that they did, everything that they worked for, turns into a nightmare. But they think that because they've been so good in the past and so generous in the past, and maybe even in the present, that God's going to overlook their lack of fidelity to his law. And I've had people, born and raised Catholic, went to Catholic school 12 years. They don't go to church. don't follow any of the church's teachings, aren't married in the church. What happened? Why don't you go to church? Look, 12 years of Catholic school, going to Mass every morning. I've been to church enough for a lifetime. I'm on my own now. Realizing our need for God. And I hear people come to confession and say, Father, I don't know what to tell you, you know, I mean, I don't commit adultery, I don't steal anything over $500, or I don't, you know, I'm faithful, and I don't, and people just go through all the things that they don't do. And, you know, I've always said that the spiritual journey is very, very simple. Avoid evil, do good. And most of us spend most of our lives simply trying to avoid evil, but none of us ever think that doing good is what we need to do. And we think if we're doing good, we can still slip in a little evil on the side, because I'm not really that bad, because I do so much, and I'm helping this school, and I built a water well in the Congo, and I did, you know, all this stuff for an orphanage down in Mexico. I mean, you know, God doesn't expect us. God expects us to recognize our sinfulness. And once we get to the point of recognizing our sinfulness, we say, oh, thank God, I don't do that anymore. You know, I don't use that kind of language anymore. I don't have that kind of prejudice anymore. I don't look at that type of material either in a magazine or online anymore. I don't, you know, look over the fence, and I don't think, you know, not tempted with these personal habits that I had when I was young. That's all good. But if you're really serious about avoiding evil, you still realize the closer I get to God, the further away I am. I realize, no, I'm not having an affair. No, I don't steal. No, I've gotten over my pornography addiction. No, I don't flirt around. And no, I don't talk so bad about this group of people. But you know what? I can be awfully uncharitable. I can be awfully selfish. You know, I can be awfully uncaring. I can be awfully unfeeling. I can be so judgmental in my mind when I see that person, and I see all the tattoos and the rainbow color of hair, and I can, all these different things that continue to challenge us. And that's what the tax collector was saying. Lord, I'm a sinner, and I'm still a sinner, and I'm afraid I'll always be a sinner. Help me to know my sinfulness. That's what this is really about. This Pharisee thought because he did all these external acts that all of his sinfulness was overlooked and no longer important. Help me to see my own sinfulness at this point in life. My sins at this age are different from when I was 25 years old. And my thoughts at this age are different from when I was 25 years old. But my sinfulness helped me to understand that the way I reacted to that person, whether it was, you know, and I had it happen just this week. I went to check into a hotel, and this young lady either never went to hospitality school or forgot everything she ever learned. And she was so ugly and so rude. I put up with it, but boy, I didn't want to. I really wanted to let her know exactly what her attitude meant to me. I made it through this one. I don't always make it through, but things like that. things like that, you know, there's still a great propensity for sin in everything that we do. And whether it be in thought, whether it be in word, whether it be in action, whether it be in impatience, whether it be in anger, be grateful that the Lord has given us the grace to overcome certain sins of our youth. But don't ever kid yourself. You know, when you come to confession and say, I really don't know what to say because I don't do anything wrong, I'm going to recommend that you go get you a much larger mirror than what you have in your house. And you spend more time looking in that mirror than you usually do. And you spend more time thinking about not the great sins of the past, but the small indiscretions and lacking charity, understanding, patience, goodness of our everyday lives that all of us are faced with. And all of us face that challenge. And that's what I invite us to look at. To never ever be pharisaical, to say, I do so much good work, I've done so much in the past, I went to the missions, I donated heavily, I worked at the soup kitchen, I was a member of St. Vincent de Paul, I did all these wonderful things. Great. That doesn't excuse us. Lord, I'm still a sinner. Lord, I still have a long way to go in my imperfections. Lord, I still have temptations. They're different, thank God, but I still have temptations, and I still need to be more Christ-like in my everyday interactions, whether it's with my children, my frustrating neighbor, at the supermarket, at the cleaners, or wherever I go. I need to have a lot more understanding, charity, and patience in my life. And that's what this gospel reminds us of. You know, it's not just the hypocrisy. You know, and when it comes to hypocrisy, and I've done this in a sermon, anyone here a hypocrite? I'm the first one to put I'm not as good as I want to be. I'm not as good as I should be. I'm not as good as I pray to be, but I'm trying. The famous words of Dr. Martin Luther King, I ain't what I ought to be. I ain't what I'm gonna be. I ain't what I should be, but thank God I ain't what I was. And I think that's a wonderful reminder. Just because we can say, thank God I ain't what I was, doesn't mean we can't strive to what God wants us to be and never rest on our laurels, always recognize our sinfulness, and always turn to the Lord. Thanks for being with us. May each day bring you closer in your walk with the Lord. God bless you.